Hi, welcome. Today we are going to be talking about Suspicious Minds by Gwenda Bond, which is the first Stranger Things book in the series that they're making. So far there are 5, and this one came out in 2019, a bit before season 3, I believe. Anyway, it needed to be after season 2 since that's when Eleven meets her mother, because this book is about her. But first, let's talk a bit about the author right here. So, she was born in 1976. Now she's a full-time writer and she lives in Lexington in the US. But she apparently wrote more than a dozen books in fantasy, mystery, science fiction, romantic comedy, and young adult stuff in general. And it says that she became a novelist in 2012, which means that she has 6 to 7 years of experience. And I think that they could have given her a sheet of paper for that typewriter. And before becoming a full-time writer, she graduated journalism. She worked in public health communications for 17 years while writing stuff on the side. And it apparently took her a while to find what she liked writing. Then when she really wanted to get into it, she got a Master's of Fine Art at Vermont College. So I'm gonna start with a spoiler-free summary of the book. If for some reason, after seeing my thumbnail and the length of this video, you still want to read it yourself, because obviously it's not gonna be a positive review. So the story is about Eleven's mother, Terry Ives, and her participation in the experiments that Dr. Brenner is conducting at the Hawkins lab, because he's in the cover. Look at him. And it's around a decade before the show starts. And basically she finds out about this experiment because her roommate Stacy found an ad in the newspaper asking for college-age women with remarkable abilities. But Stacy went once because she wanted the cash, but she said she didn't feel good about it because they drugged her and they asked her weird questions. So Terry goes in her place at the next experiment, and obviously she gets discovered pretty quick because there's a physical description that she doesn't match. It's Dr. Brenner who's interviewing her, and she pushes a bit and is like, okay, we can let you participate. In this experiment she will meet 3 other people who are gonna be our friends in the story. So they do the experiments, but at some point she meets a child at the lab by accident, and this is when she starts becoming really suspicious about what's going on, especially after her grades get tied to the experiment because they don't want them to leave. And the story is about her trying to figure out what's going on. So now, as I did with my previous videos, I'm just gonna go over the story. It begins in July 1969. Brenner is arriving at the lab, so I'm gonna be adding pictures of the characters for a visual reference. Of course we have Brenner and Terry Ives, they were in the show, so I'm gonna take the pictures from the show. For the others, I'm just gonna put some random Pinterest ones, just of what I imagine they look like, just to keep in mind who they are, because I feel like sometimes I get lost in characters when it's just their name, so hopefully it helps you. So Brenner is arriving at the Hawkins lab, which has been refurbished. They want to carry experiments to compete with the Russian communists. Obviously, still love the Russian, the series. On the right is thinking, and he describes himself having a genius IQ, which is something that will be challenged throughout the book. And with him in the car is Callie, also known as number 8. From that episode of season 2 that we always skip when we rewatch. And at the time she's 5 years old and she's gonna go stay at the lab. So they enter the building and it's clearly described as having security, armed guards and stuff. And they seem to have to show their ID, apart from Brenner, because apparently they knew it was coming but they didn't make one for him. They're hesitating since he doesn't have one, but they just let him pass. So I'm mentioning that because it's important in the story, the security, so keep that in mind. So he gets Callie settled in a room and there's a bunk bed inside because he's basically promising that she'll get a friend later on. There were already a bunch of test subjects there, and Brenner just fires them all because he doesn't like how they look. So, okay. So there's a bit of background, it's often just a sentence about the experiment. And there they say that they're trying to unlock the mind using drugs and suggestion. But later on in the book they mentioned that it's about finding which drugs for interrogation, so I'm not sure what's it's supposed to be about in the end, so it's still unclear. And that's already a criticism that I have of this book, is that if I'm gonna read a book about the experiments that led to Eleven having powers and what happened to her mother, I'd like to have some explanation about it, right? What's the point of making a book about it if you're not gonna explain what the experiment was actually about? So now we finally meet Terry Ives as she's going home to see the Apollo 11 landing. So she chats with her roommate Stacy, who has found the ad in the newspapers about the experiment, and she speaks about it, and Terry gets interested. She's like, it seems like something important. So she goes in her place at the building next time that they're supposed to go to the experiment. She presents herself as Stacy. The chick with the name list is like, oh, who are you, Stacy? Okay, go on. They don't even check. Because it's a classified experiment from the government. They don't even ask for identification or anything. Just go. And that's when we meet our first new character, which is Alice. I know she doesn't look very 70s, but I couldn't find a picture without boobies if I search for retro pictures, so. And her basically only personality trait is being a mechanic. Like, she's always covered in grease, she's in overalls, and she's talking about machines all the time. She talks about every machine as if, you become a mechanic and instantly you know about every single machine that has ever been made. And not just specialized in cars or elevators or stuff. I'm pretty sure there are two different fields. I guess you can learn to do it, but she's like in her early 20s. She couldn't know everything. So they go to a waiting room where they had to fill a release form. Like saying if you talk about the experiments, you have very big consequences. But as you continue reading, you realize it's just one big joke, because there's never any consequences if they talk about it or anything. When Terry arrives, there was already Stacy who participated before, and they say it's a new recruitment process. But I think it's literally just an excuse that the author found to make Terry have to go through the process again. Because why would they do the experiment with the drugs, which is classified on someone who didn't already sign like the non-disclosure fucking forms? This makes no sense. Why didn't she just find the ad in the newspaper herself? It would have made more sense. She's just like going through the newspaper, she finds this out, maybe she talks about her roommate, she says, oh, it looks shitty, but what does it change? It's more logical. Anyway, so Terry and Alice, who arrived at the same time to say their names, become instantly friends, obviously. They make 2 extra friends in the waiting room in the most unnatural way possible. One of them is called Gloria, and the other one is called Ken, and I just imagine him looking like a hippie Jesus, obviously. And he's saying that he's a psychic. And they're waiting for their turn to get called, like for examination, I guess. It's finally Terry's turn, and that's when she meets Brenner, because he's the one interviewing them. But now I'm thinking, okay, there's a new recruitment process. Is it because you fired them? But then why could Stacy return? Was she in the people he fired? So obviously she's not Stacy, because Stacy is supposed to have like curly black hair and Terry doesn't have that. But she like saying, oh yes, I really want to participate, please let me, blah blah blah, I'm remarkable. And he's like, okay, you can come. So now it's August 1969. Terry's boyfriend is going to Woodstock, while it's time for her to go to her actual first experiment. And the newly formed Scooby Gang go to a black van where they get taken to the Hawkins lab, and the orderly who's driving them is extremely hairy arms. So I'll name him just Mr. Gorilla for the rest of this review, because he's talked about a bit. I guess I have to give him a name, because he doesn't have one. So obviously they want to enter the van, but he's like, okay, I have to check your names for security reasons. And Ken is like, oh, that's all of us. I can tell what's on your fucking list. And the guy is like, but he just agrees and doesn't check. Classified government stuff. So this just sets the tone for the whole of this book. Is like there's supposed to be security measures, but they never enforce them. Seriously, this is the only reason that this book can go forward, is because they ignore of this. So they're chatting in the van and they ask each other like, oh, why did you decide to participate? Terry says she was curious and could use the cash. Alice obviously wants to buy a car because she's the car girl. Ken just says that his psychic sense told him that he should be there and that they will be important to each other. And Gloria says that it wasn't her first choice, but she's participating to get credit, and since she's a black woman, she got refused for other stuff. So racism is mentioned several times in this book, and it's obviously important to bring that up in a setting based in the last century and before. I mean, it's still going on. It's always important to talk about. The problem is that in this book, it felt like the author had like a list with a bunch of checkboxes, like racism checkboxes. Oh yes, I talked about this and this and this and this. Okay, I'm good. Not actually digging into it or making you like the character enough that you care about it. There's this fucking sentence. White girls, Alice said, shaking her head and meeting Gloria's eyes, don't know what work is. It's never said she's black herself. If she's white, that's such a weird fucking thing to say. Whatever. So I feel like talking about racism and discrimination in general, it just works if you like the character. If you have a character that's black and likable, then you will want them to succeed. And if they're being subjected to like racism that's preventing them from that, then it will make you feel bad about it. And that's the point of talking about racism, right? Is to make empathy grow. But in this case, it doesn't happen in this book because, yeah, the characters are just flat. So Mr. Gorilla, who's behind the wheel, tells them that they shouldn't talk about the experiments because, you know, I agree with this. I mean, I've read Thinking Fast and Slow among a few other things, and in this book, even just in this one, they were like talking about some psychological experiments and that the smallest thing can change the results. So they're out there just talking about the experiment like they're talking about the weather as if it's not going to influence it. I mean, wouldn't you want to separate them as much as possible? They should be like in different vans going and not crushing each other, especially if it's classified. You should know who's participating in the experiment. So they finally arrive at the lab and it's mentioned again how secure it is. Guards and guns and high security, all the things. And they're supposed to check them in at the reception, but Brenner arrives and it's like, no need. I am here and they are with me. And he's treating them as special already. They go to a sub-level and Terry mentions, oh, it's a labyrinth. Keep that in mind too. And to enter that level, Brenner has to put a code on a keypad. Also something to remember is that there are keypads everywhere. So they finally arrive to their assigned rooms for the experiments, and for some reason, Mr. Gorilla is in Terry's room. How did he get in first? He was with them, he drove them there. Did he just like fucking sprint to the room when they were at the reception? Because Brenner didn't even check them in. So it's like they just beelined into the room and he's already there. They should expect him. He already has teleportation abilities. So they change to hospital gowns inside the room. So she enters the room while Brenner says, okay, we're gonna let you undress and put the gown on. And while we are waiting outside. Why not have a separate room? You know, like a changing room, a locker room? It's a big fucking building and they cannot even have that. I mean, when you see the building in the series, it has space to make a changing room for subjects. I'm sure they have changing rooms for the staff. So, anyway, they're all in the room now and Brenner asks Terry, oh, do you want some water? And she takes it, but inside is the LSD that they want to give them. And while he's waiting for her to start tripping, he's like taking her blood and stuff. and I've never done LSD, I've never done any type of drugs, but I did go on the website of Healthline, and they say it takes like 20 to 90 minutes for acid to kick in. If she starts tripping when he's like taking her blood and stuff, he must be the slowest doctor ever. So while she's getting into her trip, he pays a visit to Alice, because apparently she's already high and trying to unscrew the machines in the room. Like I said, 20 to 19 minutes. It feels like 3. It's like she took a sip and she was like, whoa. And so he sees her unscrewing the machines. So it's like, let's electroshock her. Why? Oh, she likes machine and I have electricity. Maybe they fit. And the doctor was like taking care of her. She's like, are you right? I mean, this is the first day. It's like the baseline. It's like, yeah, I don't care. And so they shock her, and for some reason she has like a vision of the upside down with the Demogorgon in. So Drenner. So Brenner goes back to Terry. While she's high, he tells her to remember a worse memory. And it's when she's at the church to see her deceased parents, and it's her worst memory because that's when she does realize like, oh, they're actually dead. You know, when they're in the accident and then they get to the hospital, she doesn't realize right away, I'm never gonna see them again. And that's when she's at the church that she does. And he tells her to lock the pain away and then to wake up as if she's under hypnosis and not on acid. It's more described as like hypnosis than actual drugs. So again, from Healthline, it says that an acid trip can last from 6 to 15 hours. It tells her to wake up, and she's like talking currently like she does always in the book. So, but she's still on acid. She even says herself that she's still feeling it 8 out of 10. So she should be still tripping balls. What's happening? And the chat, I guess, nothing interesting for me to talk about it. She mentions that Mr. Gorilla said that they should not talk about the experiments between subjects, which I agree with, but apparently Brenner does not, because he says it's encouraged. Why? Why? No researcher would want their results like tainted like that. Seriously. This makes no sense. And he says that it's fine as long as Mr. Gorilla is noting down whatever they say. He's driving, he's not noting anything down. Apparently, he does not ask the participants if they've done drugs before, because Terry also mentions that she's never done that before and she's feeling weird. And he's like, that explains it. Well, maybe you should have asked. What? What was all these forms for? What did she write? Her favorite recipe? So apparently the whole experiment lasted 8 hours before they leave, even though what they say in the book, it would like be 1 hour at most. Just, it goes so fast and not that much happens, and then they tell us that it's been the whole day. I don't believe that. So, the next month. This time, for the experiment, Terry is taken into a sensory deprivation tank for the first and last time, because it's never mentioned again. And on the way, she just keeps pestering Brenner with questions about the experiment. And of course, he's like, I mean, this is classified, shut the fuck up. But it does tell her, these experiments are meant to find new ways to expose secrets. And Terry thinks, so this research is about uncovering secrets. Yeah, like the whole of science, that's the point of experiments, is to fucking discover what you didn't know. So this time, it tells her to imagine her best memory. She's thinking about when she was watching TV with her parents and sister, and like a Sunday. And then another when she's doing the horizontal tango with her boyfriend Andrew. So after she receives a letter telling her that basically she has to keep going to the experiments and that she has 30 days off because it's now tied to her grades. So some days afterwards, the most beautiful coincidence happens. Because she's working at the diner she has a job at. Ken comes in You know him, I can forgive if he's supposed to be a psychic, but then he sits down and Alice comes in, even though they didn't agree on any meeting. Then Terry thinks that this is too much of a coincidence. You don't write that in your book to give yourself an excuse to write unrealistic stuff. This will never happen. Because right afterwards, at the same moment, Gloria comes. 3 of them arriving at the same time, at the same place, without telling each other about it. What is the probability? Also, their only common point is being in the experiment. And nothing yet happens. So, and especially because Alice comes and she's like, what are we all doing here? Bitch, you're the one who came! You're the one who came! You come, they all come at once and they don't even know why they're here. And all of this for the most pointless conversation ever, because they just start talking about the letters they received. Gloria is asking herself, why would they be so interested in us coming that they would tie our grades to it and make us have Thursdays, oh my god, Thursdays off. Because you're participating in a mid to long-term experiment that requires using mid to long-term patients to see the long-lasting effects, and since you're on LSD and tripping all day, you're not fit to go to class, and since you cannot go to class, you have to replace this with something else. That's my explanation. Why is it suspicious? It shouldn't be. I guess it's to live up to the fucking title. So it's just a dumb way to make it look suspicious when it's not even. Don't participate if you don't want to. But yeah, if people keep dropping out, they will never get results. So they say that, they chat a little bit longer, and then they all leave. Like, this conversation was just unrealistic. They're back at the lab now. So Brenner is still putting his keypad number in front of everyone. And apparently the same code is for all the keypads in the lab, because top security, government building. And first scene, we're like into Gloria's mind, and she's thinking about nothing about this laboratory confirms her expectations or what she'd read in textbooks about scientific studies. And once again, just like Terry thought, this is such a coincidence. This is also like a way for the author to just bullshit her way through. Like, oh, this is so not scientific, so I can just write what I want. That's not how it works, okay? But yeah, like I said, this plot could not go forward if she didn't do that. So they each have like different experiments going on with them for some reason. It's never explained why. In the case of Gloria, she has to memorize a troop movement. You know, like I imagine like it's for the army, like you have memorized where the troops will go, and they will give you drugs to see if you will reveal it if you're using it. So how does this go with the definition they gave at the beginning, like it's to unlock the mind? This is more like, yeah, finding what drugs you can use for interrogation of like Russian spies, but this doesn't fit, like it's not uniform. And while I was writing this, I realized that we never get to see what Ken does. It's like he's not interesting enough. He's just like there as this convenient psychic when we need him, but we're not actually like looking at what he's doing, even though he's the psychic one. They should want to be interested in him. We also get a glimpse of Alice, and she's getting some electroshock again, and she sees the demo card. So let's go back to Terry, who's alone in her room, even though she's on LSD, and she could like have, I don't know, a fucking seizure anytime, and they just leave her alone. And also they don't want to record the results. Like, you just leave her there. Okay, you're tripping, but I don't actually care what's happening, you know, I'm just gonna go and see someone else. So she's tripping, and she's remembering, oh, I wanted to ask Brenner about the letters that they sent. So I'm gonna go ask him now, because otherwise I will forget. She goes through the door, which is unlocked. Not only you leave her alone, but then the door is unlocked, and she's somehow alone in the corridor. She manages to get inside the higher security wing because she's not following someone. She just sees that a door with a keypad is about to close, and she just grabs it to enter. So there must have been a person going through that door, right? And then they just vanish into thin air because she doesn't get seen, there's no one there. And it happens every time. Whenever she goes out of her room, it's like there's no one. She's in a back room. It's empty. There's no one around. She just go wherever she wants, and it's like I said, she says it's a labyrinth. How does she find her way back? Where's the security? They don't guard the doors when there are civilians inside the building? What about the cameras? Because there are cameras. No one's watching them when there are people inside. That's not the scientists. Anyway, she passes that security door, and then she finds Kelly. And she starts becoming obsessed about trying to figure out what they're doing there, because there's like children, oh my god. So later, she goes to the library to research Bernard, seeing what he's up to, in his life. But she cannot find anything about him, so it's like, he's shady. The next time, during the experiment, she doesn't let herself get hypnotized, because apparently it makes her trip, and then he's like, oh, look at this, focus on it. And she doesn't, so she's just tripping, she's not hypnotized. And Brenner asks her to bug Gloria's phone, and then tells her like, oh, you're not gonna remember this. You're gonna do it, but you're not gonna remember me asking. So Terry goes to Gloria's shop. She wants to tell Gloria that he asked her to do it. And Gloria's like, okay, let me put it in so he doesn't get suspicious. He thinks you've done it. And anyway, it's a flower shop. Oh yeah, because her name is Gloria Flowers, and her family has a flower shop. And she says, it's fine, I don't care if he hears our flower orders. Now it's Halloween, and the Scooby Gang is invited to Andrew's house for a party. There's another mention of Alice being the mechanic girl. She doesn't wear dresses, and if she did, people would insult her, saying, oh, that's not for you. Dude, it's 1969. I think she would get more shit wearing pants. Actually, I think the opposite would happen. Why are you doing that? You're a woman. You should not be working with machines. You should not be wearing pants. So they start talking about drinks and costumes, and then someone asks Gloria why she decided to study biology. And I'm gonna read you a little excerpt. Biology is how we all and everything around us works. So that was it at first, but not anymore. Everything around us, like, can you use biology to explain a fucking concrete beam? I don't think so. And Terry asks, oh, what is it? This might sound silly. Never. You can trust the people at this table. Alright. People working together. Scientific progress can only happen when people use the same standards and share their findings. Personal differences don't matter when it's working right. Only differences in the findings. And how does that fit her, like, going into biology? You can say that for any science. So Terry mentions then 8 Callie to the others, and now she really wants to find out whatever's going on with this experiment in the lab. Then we get a little scene with Callie and Brenner, and he makes her practice her powers by making her make a sunny day in the room. If you remember, her power was to make people see things that are not actually there. But that's really all in terms of building her character. We just know she's 5, she's annoying, and she has powers. That's all. So he has to bribe her with candy so that she would do what he asks. And at some point she mentions like, oh, when is the woman who came to visit me going to come back? And he's like, who? Brenner then goes to ask his security to review the footage since she arrived here. So that's months, okay? And starting from the beginning, instead of asking her when did she come, she could have said like 2 weeks ago. That would have narrowed it down so much. Why did you not ask her? Because we need time for the plot and it needs to take so much time so the rest can happen. This is bullshit. This is bullshit. So now it's November and there is a mandatory viewing of Nixon's speech about Vietnam for the students, but Andrew's like, no, I'm gonna protest with my friends, and he gets arrested and Terry has to bail him out. I'm mentioning it, but I'm just gonna talk more about it later when it's actually useful. And everyone meets, including Andrew, at the diner, and this time it was planned, like it happens with normal people. Terry says that she wants to visit Ives again, but that she doesn't know how to go through the door because she was lucky the first time. But obviously, Alice saw Brenner's code when he wasn't putting it in front of everyone, and the same code on every keypad. So then they talk about a plan to get Brenner out of Terry's room so that she can just sneak out again, put the code on the door. Ken volunteers as being a distraction. And Terry says that if she's not able to find Callie, she's gonna look for Brenner's office instead, because it's obviously in the vicinity. Gloria does mention that Brenner is not a slouch. Most scientists would lock up classified information, and she's damn right, but from what I've been telling you so far, you know how it's gonna go. Next experiment, they launch the plan, and apparently they are in gowns, but they somehow have their stuff on them, and Ken has managed to get fizzy candy in his stuff in the room, and he just puts some in his mouth and pretends to have a seizure. So let me just read the scene. Keening and covering his mouth, he put a handful of the candies with the sour exploding centers in and chommed down, then threw his head back so the guy could hear the fizzing sound and see the foam. He jerked as convincingly as he could, imitating his uncle mid-seizure. As anticipated, the practically a kid orderly flipped out. "I think he's got rabies," he said before he rushed out to the door. So they have someone to watch them and they don't know about basic medical stuff? What is he there for then? Like, you'd expect someone to be in the room in case there's a medical emergency, so that if they get a seizure, they put them into position and then they call someone who's more qualified. And rabies? Seriously? So while the guy rushes out to get someone more qualified, he also sneaks out and pulls the fire alarm. But when the other guy goes to see the doctor, she tells him to get Brenner because apparently only him can do something. So Brenner tells Terry like, "Oh, just stay there because I'm being called." And he leaves with Mr. Gorla. So he does not even leave someone with her again.
Are you stupid or something?
Even after knowing that someone sneaked out to Callie, there's a fire alarm going on. You'd expect the corridors to be quite busy, even just people like picking out, saying like, is there actually an emergency? So you'd expect it to be busy, but no, Terry can just go out of her room in her fucking gown that she mentions you can see her ass with. She goes to the security wing, types the code, enters, and just no problem. No problem. So it is not in her room, so she searches for the office, which is behind another security door with the same code, and the door to the office is obviously unlocked because you need to, get the plot to move forward. And she goes into the room, she tries the drawer, this one is locked, but the filing cabinets with all the classified information is wide open and she can just go through the folders. And so she sees the name MK Ultra on the files, Project Indigo, and MK Ultra is actually an experiment that went on from the CIA to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used during interrogations. So it fits with what Gloria does. The rest, no. And so she can read those files without trouble, even though it's mentioned like right before that she was trying to read the names on the offices and the letters wouldn't stop vibrating and dancing. Yeah, because she's tripping. Yeah, she's doing all this while she's on acid, by the way. On these papers, she sees that they're numbers from 1. Using the heights and the ages, like, she can tell they are children. So they're more like Kelly. She doesn't have time to read more, obviously. She leaves the office and she sees that Kelly is actually in her room. But before she can do anything, she's grabbed by someone, finally, and brought back. Also, she has to invent an excuse. Didn't you have to think about that before being there, like part of the plan? So she had all that time to like go to the room, see she's not there, go to the office, look at the files, because in addition to Ken having pulled her alarm, Alice tried to distract Brenner further. She asked for him. She says, I want some more electricity. And Brenner was like, no one who's sane would ask for more than that. And he's right. But then Alice says, but if you do, I will describe the monsters to you. So they do it, and then he just says, fascinating, and then goes back to Terry. And somehow getting shocked made her like see the future, because she sees a vision of Terry with like the electrodes getting shocked, what happens in the season 2. And yeah. While all this shit is going down, Gloria also tries to sneak out of her room, but her door is locked like it should be, even though she's alone, so another fault. And you think, oh, maybe the one person taking care of her is like a little bit more intelligent, but then you read a little bit later that she didn't take her LSD, and whoever was taking care of her didn't notice. Even though if I read, it says that there are physical effects of LSD, such as dilated pupils, twitching, increased temperature, heart rate and blood pressures. I'm certain they would monitor that so they could tell if she didn't take it. Like, Saga pretend to take something like, whoa, I'm starting to see colors even though I look the same, I'm not feeling it physically. But I assure you, I'm on drugs. So they leave. Once they're out of the van, they obviously start talking to know what Terry found out. And Gloria says that she didn't like being locked in, and she asks Alice to teach her to pick a lock, because obviously she's a mechanic, so she can pick a lock. I mean, she could have learned, but she never gives context on why she has that skill. So next scene is Brenner in his actually existing surveillance suite, but he doesn't seem bothered with like having people looking at the camera while there are people in the building, because they would have noticed. But now they have this surveillance thing that you see in the show, you know, where they're with the headphones listening to phone calls. Yeah, I guess monitoring the lab is less important. And he was called there because they're intercepting a call between Terry and her sister. I'm gonna tell why in a second, but then, so he asked them to review the footage to see what visited them. They finally got it using 3 men, because it was so much footage, because you couldn't fucking narrow it down by asking Callie when she came. Anyway, the reason for mentioning that phone call is because Terry tells her boyfriend's name in it. He's now facing consequences from doing his little protest against Nixon. He's getting suspended from university, basically, or college, whatever. And now he's eligible in the draft lottery to get sent to Vietnam. The next scene is actually the lottery, and for some reason Terry invites Alice there. Okay. So the lottery works like this. The person's picking a random capsule, and inside there's a birth date. Well, a birthday, like 14th of September. And whoever has that birthday in the US is eligible, like, to go be sent to war, basically. Brenner called someone from the government to make sure that the first date that was picked is Andrew's birthday, because he wants to distract Terry from what's happening in the lab. Because they think, oh, if she's crying about her boyfriend, she won't think about Callie. Another day, another lab experiment. Alice is getting shocked again. This time she sees the upside down, but also a vision of the future with 11 while she's slamming those guards into the wall. Terry, on her side, she gets her blood taken. Brenner asks her if she has questions about the experiment while she takes her dose. Okay. They talk, but it's not very useful or giving any information really. Brenner tells her that he had heard the news about her boyfriend, and for some reason, she suspects him. Like she just said, oh, I've heard about your boyfriend being, drafted, and she's like, oh, how does he know? He must have done it. A doctor in the fucking lab in Hawkins must have influenced the government to send my boyfriend to war. I mean, he did, but we know it because we're reading the book and it says in the book. But for someone that's not Brenner, how the fuck would they know? The fact that he could ask is also fucking stupid, because if he can ask to put a priority in the drafting list, then a lot of other people would do it. Like some official who doesn't like some guy, he's just gonna call someone and say, oh, can you put him first? So there would be like so many phone calls like asking to get put first. So then afterwards, like Terry's in her room and Brenner somehow orchestrated a visit from Callie. So what's the point of the lottery? Then if you, from what I understood, he made the lottery so that Andrew would have problems, so that Terry would stop thinking about whatever is going on at the lab. But then he just makes Callie visit her, so I don't understand. I really don't understand. She shows her powers to Terry? How would he allow that? Classified government experiment, but you're gonna take the child that you're experimenting on who has powers and you're gonna show it to a civilian. Anyway, this gives Terry more dumb ideas for like her plans to sneak out again, for another distraction basically. From what I understand, the whole time Brenner is like behind one of those one-way mirrors, but it's not really said. I don't remember, I don't want to check. I don't care. So he's there watching, I guess, and then afterwards there's this guy who comes and gives him the results of the blood test that Terry did. She's pregnant, basically. And so he starts thinking about all the possibilities for this child. After the experiment, they want to meet in private, the Scooby Gang. So they go to Alice's places, which is a garage where she and her uncle work. And there are so many big machines, and that's so impressive that she can do all that, blah blah blah. They just keep sucking her off the whole time. They're all in college. And also it keeps like feeding this only personality trait that she has of being a mechanic. That's the whole thing about her, really. What else does she like, actually? Apart from cars, but that's into the mechanic thing. I'm trying to think, but... No, I don't. There's nothing else, actually. It's the same for Gloria. Like, her only personality traits are dressing nice, because she's the only person whose clothes are mentioned, and the fact that she likes comic books. That's it. And Ken is a psychic. So Terry mentions the fact that she's suspicious about Brenner's involvement in the drafting. They believe her for some reason. Okay. Even though that's not very logical or plausible. They change the subject because they start talking about 11 that Alice saw in her vision. And then, so Alice saw 11 throw this guy against the wall. She's like, oh, she must have powers. And then Terry tells, oh yeah, I met again the kid and she showed me that she has powers too. And the whole experiment, they're on acid. Now they're supposedly not on acid anymore, and they're talking about what they saw, and they take everything at face value, even though you're supposed to be drugged, dude. If I saw a fucking elephant while being drugged, people wouldn't be like, I believe you, even though I knew you were on drugs. Or can you see all these things and assume it's true when you've been on acid the whole time? Gloria asks Alice to describe the kid she saw to compare them with Callie to see if it's the same person. She described her short brown hair, really short, like one of my brothers, or like it had been shaved and only just started to grow back. She was thin, but she looked healthy. Maybe around 12 or 13. Pale skin, big piercing eyes. And the first distinction that Terry wants to do between these two people is, that cannot be her. She's younger. Younger, that's the first thing you see. So they continue making plans to uncover stuff, and just out of the blue, because there have been Lord of the Rings references in the book, because Terry is reading it after Andrew recommended it to her, and just out of the blue, Alice is like, if we're the Fellowship, I want to be Galadriel. And by the way, I didn't read Lord of the Rings, but it mentions in the book that Galadriel is not in the Fellowship. For if you're a fan and you're just jumped in your chair, don't worry. But I want to read them. Okay, just out of nowhere. You know, they're college-age people, so early to mid-20s. This is the sort of stuff that the kids in season 1 would say. Like, for example, Dustin. Like, if they start like... if it wasn't about Dungeons and Dragons and they start like looking afterwards and stuff, like, oh, we're the Fellowship and I'm this one, it wouldn't be off if they did it, but in this instance they're always talking and acting like kids, and it's very annoying. You can be invested in the story, but you're not gonna say that sort of stuff unless you're role-playing. They're not. Once again, another lab scene. Brenner gives Terry vitamins, you know, for a pregnancy, but he pretends to say, oh, it's to help your brain recover from the pace. And she doesn't take them, obviously, because she thinks it's shady. So he drugs her again, and she ends up in the like black space where Eleven goes to find stuff and shit. She sees Gloria in there, but that's all. I guess it's just like a hint of her capacity to do that that's developing. But on that day, unfortunately for her, Brenner his two brain cells are connecting and he's not leaving her alone in the room like he should do all the time. And now it's Christmas, and she receives a Polaroid camera from Andrew, and he says that it can help her on her mission to uncover stuff. So she will use it later.
Goodbye to the 60s, the decade of descent, and welcome to the giant mystery that is the 1970s.
It's January, and obviously they did not go to the lab during the Christmas holidays, because even evil Dr. Brenner celebrates Christmas. They meet after the holidays, before they have to go back to the lab, and they're still at Alice's garage. They come, but Alice hides herself just to prank them. Oh, congratulations, you have successfully caused a heart attack. Oh, come on, it was a gag. I got you, and I taught you how to take apart the door lock. What does that have to do with anything? This just comes out of nowhere. What does that have to do with anything? They don't mention any locks before. Anyway, 1 page later, they're eating a butterscotch pie. Ken asks, what is butterscotch anyway? And Gloria says brown sugar and butter usually, sometimes a little vanilla. Okay, I mean, it means she just like tried to make one someday. And when they all gave her a look, she added, baking's just another form of chemistry. Alice could not believe it. You contain more layers than anyone I know, Gloria Flowers.
Layers! Onions have layers.
Gloria.
Have layers. Onions have layers? You get it. We both have layers.
Always knowing what butterscotch is, so fucking impressive. You just tried to make a cake once and people think you're a chemist? Especially a woman, you know, like back then, a woman, kitchen, baking, make me a pie. Oh, fuck. Well, anyway, back to the experiments. Since they know that Alice gets vision when she's tickled by a bit of electricity, she wants to use that ability for their own purposes, you know? Terry asks if she can make a similar machine, because obviously, since she can work on a car, she can make biomedical equipment. So the next plan is basically they want to recreate the conditions that Alice has at the lab. So the LSD plus the electroshock to get another vision. So the next time they go there, Terry's back into the black void. She's talking to Kelly like it's some sort of fucking telephone line. Like, oh, hi, I'm in the black space. I can actually talk to you, even though in the fucking show, 11 can only interact with people who are like either from the upside down or infected by it, if I remember well. Like, for example, when she disappears and she sees Mike in the fucking pillow fort, and he's like trying to talk to her and she sees him but she cannot do anything. Like she's there and maybe feels it a bit but he cannot see her. When she can interact with something, so like she touched the Demogorgon which opened the gates, she could interact with Billy because he was infected by the Mind Flayer. And Max, I guess she was also infected by the Upside Down when she just healed her at the end of season 4. So I feel like anytime she can interact with someone in that void, it's because they've been touched by the Upside Down. So not just some random person. Like she never used this to just talk to someone, I think. I don't remember. So 8 can talk to her and see her apparently. So what's happening on the other side? Because Terry's in the void, but like Kelly's in her room, like is she just transported in the black space? Is Terry like a threat projected in front of her? And all that just to have a dumb way to be able to talk to Kelly without having to sneak out in the corridors again? Because, you know, twice is already a bit of a stretch, so imagine if she did it every time. It's just... And it's just to have a fucking dumb chat. And like, oh, Terry says they're friends. Oh, he said you would have a friend, but you don't. But I am your friend, you know. I don't feel so bad. And blah 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 and whatever. It's not even that useful. Then a scene with Brenner where he apparently learned that they were gathering in the garage, and he wants to have cameras there to know what they're saying. So basically, their top security guy went to the uncle of Alice. He asked, oh, do you want this very super cool security system? But the uncle was like, I already have cameras, bro. So the guy comes to tell Brenner that he refused, and Brenner is mad. And the guy does not want to risk his company, because if he installed cameras anyway, he would get caught. What you've come to tell me is that a mechanic as outsmarted was supposedly the best security and intelligent force on the planet. Dude, you cannot even look at your own cameras. You have people running around in your corridors and you don't even know it? Come on. So Andrew has been called to go to the army. Terry tells him that he should go see his family after his mom has been bitching about the fact that he just stays with Terry. So he's going. And then another scene with Gloria where she's at the flower shop. She knows that they're listening. So she pretends to talk with her mom about a transfer letter that she got to go into a Californian university because they're picking black students to try to increase their presence in STEM. She basically says that she was thinking about accepting it just to see what Brenner would do to keep her coming. They just keep ahead, and now they're in Terry's car going to Hawkins' lab with the electroshock machine that Alice could just make. They're going to the lab because she feels like that her visions would be better if she's at the lab. So they drive through the fence. They cannot go further. Gloria gives her the LSD that she has. You know, the time she didn't take it, she just put it in her pocket, in her gown that actually does not have pockets. You're starting to understand the problem of this book, I think. I think you did like 10 minutes ago, or 20 from the beginning. Just... They're at the fence, and while the LSD is starting to kick in, Ken just tells a story of a ghost who was stealing his parents' shoes or something. Useless, just... She finally gets high, and then they shock her, and she just gets a vision of the interior of the lab. She sees 11 with Brenner. I don't understand the scene much. Like, they're describing what they're doing, but I'm trying to think about the show. But I cannot remember which scene it was. I cannot picture it in my head. So you already have a fucking made up scene and you cannot even describe it properly. Some security actually notices that there's something off and they start looking for them, so they run away. you know, with a big electroshock machine and someone on LSD, they manage to go to the car without being noticed, and they drive away. And all that for what? Well, even at the end of the chapter they said, what did they learn that was new? It seemed like nothing. Yes, it was! It was nothing! So, Andrew, in a week, has to go for his physical exam, and obviously he's healthy, so he's gonna be sent to war. And Terry notices that her pants are getting tired because, you know, she's pregnant, but she doesn't know she's pregnant, so she doesn't think much about it. She thinks she's just very hungry. And I guess she's in the lucky percentage that doesn't have morning sickness. They go again to a garage. Terry breaks down because of Andrew. And they chat about Alice's vision because they could not do it in the car, I guess. Why are they just doing it now? They figure out that she's seeing the future because she saw some computers that weren't invented yet, as well as some cars from which she doesn't know the model, and since she's a car person, then she would know, you know. Terry says that she wants to try to get Brenner's files again, but that he stays on top of her lately. Well, I hope, after what you did, I hope he would fucking look at you and be sure you don't do anything stupid while you're here. You've just been doing that. And then there's this very forced interaction between Andrew and Ken because, you know, since Andrew has seen the friends, they're all friends now. They're a big 5-person gang. They have nothing in common apart from the experiment, and nothing, if you count Andrew, he isn't even in the experiment. But they're all these super friends out of nowhere. And Ken goes to see him. This whole scene is so unrealistic. It's painful. I think you should break up while you're gone. I don't know why, I just have a feeling it might help her somehow. Andrew stayed quiet. Then, you sure you don't want to date her? I'm sure. Andrew shook his head. Well, if I don't come back, you have my blessing.
What's better than this? Guys being dudes.
What is this? Back at the lab. You're getting the gist of things now. It's always the same thing happening all the time, just with slightly different variations. Terry's back into the void. She talks to Callie again. And also, our unrealistic thing is the way that Callie talks. I am named after a goddess. She wore a tiger skin and was fierce in battle, says the 5-year-old. Anyway, all this scene just to ask her to make a distraction next time. So I guess afterwards, Alice is in her room and 8 pays her visit. The 5-year-old can sneak out of the high security wing to go see a patient in a fucking labyrinth. Do you see a problem with that? Because I don't. I love this book so much. Alice asked her how she got here, rightfully, and Kelly just says, I ran away. So she leaves, and then she goes back to her room, and Dr. Brenner is waiting for her. Like, you didn't search for her, you just waited for her to come back. Just look at the fucking cameras, dude. You have a child running around. Why is she unsupervised in the first place? There's a child? You would need someone all the time in the room with them, right? Just to make sure they don't fall on their head and fucking crank that scalp and like children do. Now we're in March. Gloria comes back home one night just to learn that Dr. Brenner has invited himself for dinner and that is coming very soon. And you know, that coincidence at the diner when they arrive all at the same time, when they're the same sort of coincidence right now, when Alice shows up right at the moment it's supposed to come. There are 365 evenings in 1 year, and you're telling me that she comes at the very same time that Dr. Brenner comes. No! He comes following from hearing that she wants to transfer, even though that was the month prior. I guess he was busy. He's just like to her parents, oh, she's exceptional, we don't want her to go, she's very good for the experiment, blah blah blah, just like making them tell Gloria to stay basically. And so he finally leaves, and Alice can finally say why she's here, and it's just to tell Gloria that she saw a vision where Terry gets electroshocked, like, you know, that happened back then. So she just came for that and happened to run into Brenner. So back to Terry, who's still struggling to fit into her clothes, and it's her last day with Andrew before he gets sent to war. They do the horizontal tango again, and then they take a selfie with the Polaroid because Alice told them to just do it because she invented the selfie, you know, so they can have a picture of each other to keep with them. Andrew does give the breakup speech that Ken talked about, but Terry is like half ignoring. She's like, no. Well, then afterwards she's in the mindset that they kind of broke up, but also that they're still together, that just whatever. Then Andrew leaves her because it's time for him to go, but so he leaves her and he goes to see Ken. Afterwards, he wastes the time that he could have spent with Terry to see Ken, to tell him that, like he said, what he asked him to say. And also just to have a scene where Ken comes out to him as gay. And then he's in Hawkins because he got a vision, I guess, that that's where he would meet the love of his life. I don't give a shit about inclusivity if you don't make the characters likable, because I had the same feeling after his coming out that I would do if a piece of cardboard like said it to me. I don't care. I don't care enough about Ken to care about his struggles. Same with Gloria. I care about no one in this story. Seriously. There isn't one character that I enjoyed, or that I kept thinking about, wanting them to succeed. No, I was just reading that book on autopilot, saying like facts and stuff. I didn't identify with any character. I didn't feel like I wanted more of them. I didn't give a shit about him coming out. So finally, Callie pulls out the distraction that Terry asked for, and it took her so long because basically Brenner punished her, and so she could not do anything for a while. So they talk into the void again, and then Brenner is called for Code Indigo because she's acting up like she's been asked to, and he leaves the room, once again with Mr. Gorilla, to leave Terry alone, even though he knows she's the one who's been sneaking out. And he does not close the door. He does not lock the door.
Are you stupid or something?
So she goes to his office, which is apparently the same way than to go to Callie. So she's behind him and he doesn't see anything. Oh, but no, but in the story she basically just teleports from her room to the office. For convenience. Because what happens in between? She can do that with her bag, with the fucking camera inside that she could smuggle into a government building. She starts pulling out the documents that are not locked and taking pictures. All the while being on LSD. Then on the way back she attempts to go see Callie and she gets caught because Dr. Brenner is just standing there, you know. And that Eight had told him what she had asked her to do. He takes her back to her room, look at the pictures, think they're too shitty to be taken seriously. He just takes the one that has his name on it, and then he lets her go with the pictures. Why? 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 You could just keep them. It's Polaroid. It's on the physical fucking picture. It's not like your phone where you could have sent it to Google Drive, and even if it's deleted in your camera roll, it's still there. No, it's a Polaroid. It's physical. Just fucking tear it, burn it. But no, he leaves her with them. Why? Why? So then there's a little segment where Brenner's being annoyed by higher-ups, I guess, the ones that are funding, because they feel like his experiments are useless, and so he invites them over for a demonstration to show that they're making progress. And Terry sends her own kind of invitation, basically telling reporters to come to the Hawkins lab in 3 weeks, because they will have an interview with Dr. Brenner. So it's now April. Terry is chatting with Stacy, her roommate. For some reason they go on like a Beatles tangent. Terry says, "I'm not giving up," meaning the experiments. Good to know. If only he could have pep talked Paul into staying with the band. It doesn't seem fair to blame Yoko. But who else are you people going to blame? The Beatles had decided to break up and kept it a secret until this week, when Paul made a big announcement about going solo. John supposedly was leaving first. They could blame him. Yeah, right. Oh, I forgot, you got a postcard from Andrew, because that's the point. Is that he's given a postcard. Just why the Beatles tangents? Okay, it's the 70s, yay! So now it's the time when there's the appointments, you know, like the higher-ups and the journalists. They arrive on the same day, obviously, because otherwise it's not fun. Brenner sees the journalist, is like, ha 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 ha, and just tells them, oh yes, but I don't actually have time. So talk to the doctor if you want some answers to questions, and then he just takes the subjects and go down as usual, after agreeing to take a picture with their gowns on. Okay. And he's like wondering if it's someone from his staff that orchestrated the thing. Oh yeah, it must be someone from my staff, even though after this subject like went into my office and took pictures of my documents because she wants to expose me, but it cannot be her, right? Why? She would be your first fucking suspect! Please! Oh, why? Where does that genius IQ has been talking about? He takes Terry to the demonstration he planned for the higher-ups with Callie. So basically she's showing them like flames and they think everything's on fire, but then Terry's like, it's okay, calm down, you can stop the demonstration. Yeah, that's it. Then Brenner just put like his hand on her shoulder and said, oh, we're nurturing the next generation as well. This makes her think about, what if I'm pregnant? And after the demonstration, Brenner is talking with these guys. He somehow lets Callie go visit Alice. Okay, why? Like, how does she even find her way? Because she's always alone when she goes visit them. It's not like there's a fucking orderly with her. She's always alone. So the Scooby Gang is back into town and they start chatting as usual. Rinse and repeat, like I said, and Terry tells them her suspicion about being pregnant. She goes back home, she tells her roommate, who books her an appointment with her creepy doctor. And now it's the month of May, and it's time for her appointment. And he examines her and tells her she's probably into her seventh. That she's probably into her seventh month. Why is it so hard to say? Then he's very insistent on the fact that she should get an abortion. When you see today's climate on abortion, the fact that the law was changed in the US and that we're still fighting to get access to safe abortions everywhere, like it's threatened everywhere in some degree. And back then it was even worse. Like they actually put Roe v. Wade not long before the story, but that doesn't mean that the doctors would be encouraging abortions. Especially in your 7th month, that's basically the baby's there. So I do not believe for a minute that a male doctor would say that to a woman in the 70s. Like, oh, you have to get an abortion, that's disgusting. He would probably say that's disgusting, but then he would say like, that's your problem, don't be a hoe. And I didn't note it down for some reason, but now I just remembered that Gloria even says herself like, oh, if you need something, I know some girls from church who have done it. Okay? I mean, this is more plausible coming from her because, you know, they're women. So, but a male doctor? An old male doctor? It's actually giving me pro-life vibes, this scene. Because it's like, I'll get an abortion, we're forcing you, we're the medical system, we want you to have an abortion to make us money. I don't know what to think of this. Back at uni, she calls Andrew's mom because she wants to talk to him and she doesn't have a direct line to him. However, she breaks the news to her that he's dead already. Then you get a little paragraph of Ken feeling cold when Andrew dies, but since, as I said before, they're all cardboard cutouts that I don't care about, so I don't give a shit he died, to be honest. Just no emotion in this book. I didn't feel any emotion for any character. So Andrew's dead, and somehow this does not affect Terry as much as you'd expect. Her friends and roommate take care of her while she's grieving, heavily pregnant, and she also takes her finals. And once she's finished with them, she goes to the library and she asks She basically asked the librarian, like, if someone wanted to disappear, how could they do it? Because that's what librarians know. And the librarian's like, are you in trouble? It's not talked about for now, it's at the end of the story, so don't forget about this part. Then afterwards she meets with Ken. He tells her that she's gonna have a girl because apparently he's an echography machine in addition to being a psychic. And she tells him that at the doctor's office she read a National Geographic article about a woman the name of Jane Goodall who studied chimpanzees but named them instead of just giving them numbers, you know, like Brenner does because he's so evil. And she also decides that she does not want to go to the experiments anymore. So she's not gonna go next time. Since she's pregnant and she doesn't want to be drugged. And we still manage to get a lab scene because Callie goes to see Alice for no fucking reason that drives the plot forward. It's just like chatter, kid chatter, just so fucking annoying. Like, shut up, shut up. There's only 300 pages in this book and it felt like 1,000. It's the end of the semester, so they have to leave their dorms. Terry goes back in her parents' homes to live with her sister, and they're putting boxes inside the house when they get a call from Brenner, who says that if she does not come back to the lab, he's gonna do things to Alice and Callie. So she calls the Scooby Gang to come, but she suspects that her house is bugged. So she brings them to a room. They pretend to rehearse a certain plan out loud, all the while writing in a notebook like the actual plan. And the plan is to get files from Brenner's office and to give to the press. But the real plan is something else. You know, she writes those sentences, but they're pretty long sentences, so there would have to be awkward silences in between. Like when they're talking, she's scribbling, and then they answer. Like, this is absolutely not suspicious. Dr. Brenner, they're making an absolutely non-suspicious plan. So they were rehearsing the plan, and then before they can do anything else, some men just barge into the house and grab Alice, saying that they have papers to keep her at the lab like all the time. We're in June now. Terry's on her bed. She's trying to access the void, like without drugs and stuff, and she manages. And she sees Alice in the lab. It's only her and Gloria at the lab the next time. Well, Alice is there, but constantly now. Brenner forcefully gives Terry an injection. He says he's going to help with the pregnancy. Then he tells her, that's gonna be all for today. We're just gonna take some blood and then you can rest while your friends are getting finished, even though we said earlier that it takes the whole day. Okay, she's just gonna stay there like for 8 hours. He just leaves her alone to go to his office to wait for her to come instead of just locking her door or staying with her the whole time so that she cannot access his files like she said in her plan. Just why? Genius IQ though. Terry goes back in the void again. She talks to Callie. She tells her to distract everyone again. While this is going on, Gloria picks the lock of her room and she pulls the fire. So someone goes to get Brenner because the distraction that she asked for is that Callie makes it look like Alice is dead from too much voltage in the brain. And for some reason the doctor is crying. Like Alice is just on the ground and the doctor is like not trying to do CPR or nothing, just crying. What? While they're doing a little show, Terry pulls out a knife that she managed to smuggle into a government building, and she tells him like, let us go. So Ken did not go to the experiment because he's actually in Terry's car going through the front fence into the lab, into a lower level basically that Alice dreamed about, I guess, and he just has to wait for them there and then do their grand escape with Alice because the point was to rescue her. You can ask yourself, how did they bring her down? Gloria, who had picked the lock, she took a wig from her mom and stole some orderly clothes, and she just comes with a gurney saying that she's gonna take Alice to the morgue for this dissection. So you know how she's black, and they were talking about like the transfer to get more black students into science. So this means that there are not that many black people into science this time. So why would there be a black female scientist in this government building and nobody notices her? Like if there were at least one, everybody would know what she would look like. So she just comes, she brings Alice and she leaves. She goes all the way down to that sub-level where Ken is waiting. She can put Alice in the trunk or something. And there are guards around like guarding the car, but Brenner's like, oh, it's okay, just let them go. Nobody notices her putting Alice in the car. They leave, and the whole plan was to make it look like Alice was like dead. So they wouldn't look for her, because afterwards they go to a bus station. Terry gives Alice some girl clothes, and Alice is like, oh, I have a dress, I look like Cinderella, as if she... What? Nobody's preventing you from wearing one. And also, you're what, you're 8? So they put her on the bus to Canada, to her cousins, to make Brenner continue thinking that she's dead. But wouldn't he just realize instantly that she is not, because she's not in the fucking morgue? Because he'd want to see her, right? So it would last at most 24 hours. He thinks she's dead long enough for her to get away. No, what I remember reading is that they want them to think that she's like dead. Like dead forever, so... So I remember that injection that Brenner gave Terry, well, it's basically just to make her give birth. He knows that when she is gonna start having contractions, she's gonna go to the only hospital around, and this is indeed where Stacy takes her. And you remember in the show probably that she's on the bed, and then someone pulls out their mask and it's Dr. Brenner who takes the baby. Well, this is what happens. She wakes up and her sister Becky is on her side, and just like in season 2, she says, I'm sorry, they couldn't save the baby, and Terry's like, no, I know she's alive. And yeah, now we're at the epilogue, which is in November, so a few months afterwards. Terry is waiting in a park for Gloria, who comes with a folder. That's Ken's new boyfriend, who very conveniently works at the lab and would apparently risk his whole life to get a few papers in Brenner's office to give them to him. And inside it's the file of 11, and this proves to Terry that her daughter is alive, basically. And that's where the book ends. That was my main disappointment. What I expected is that this book would end when Terry gets shocked. Because, okay, Alice told Gloria, but then they don't do anything with that information afterwards. And I really expected this book to end, because it's like a good ending, like that flows into the series. You know, she gets shocked, she becomes catatonic, she cannot do anymore. It's like her end. We get this stupid experiment, but we get nothing of her search for a daughter. So I thought that was the main... if you ignore everything else, even if it had been a really good book, I would still have been disappointed for that. Because... what did I learn that's new? Nothing. And that would have been interesting to know what she did to find her daughter, because she would have had to gather a lot of information, of actual information, to know what's happening, because you see all those newspaper clippings and stuff in the series. So, because she has like a whole filing cabinet, I don't remember exactly, but still. And that's how 11 also finds Callie. It's because she's looking through the documents she collected and she see a picture of her, and she can use that picture to find her in Chicago. Also, the 2 last chapters, you cannot convince me that they were not written like the day before the deadline, because they are so rushed. The whole ending is so rushed. It's insane. I feel like I was reading at 2 times speed, like skimming. But there were actually full sentences. I was reading the full sentences. So it's so fast, it makes no sense, and it's not a good ending, it's not a good book overall. So now let's go into my final general thoughts about this book, because my throat is starting to hurt from talking so much. After I made up my own mind, I read some reviews. What people really felt is that either the audience was wrong, like it was really children, or that the author didn't really know what it was, the audience she was looking for. She's like a young adult, so yeah, it will be a younger audience. But this book felt too childish for the topic. You know, it's like governmental stuff, experiments, drugs, LSD. It's not a kid topic. And in Stranger Things, there are kids, but the whole story does not feel childish because there are monsters, there are guns, there's blood. There are kids, but the story is not childish. So apparently she had a lot of creative freedom for that book. Yeah, so this is making me think that's more like a cash grab, because if you really wanted to make a Stranger Things book explaining the lore, you would want to do it yourself and not ask someone to do it for you and say, oh, you can do what you want. Don't think she was the right person to write this book, really. I haven't read her other books, I don't know how good they are. This one is pretty bad, so I'm not gonna hate on her personally because I don't know about the rest of her work, but she definitely was not the person who should have written that book. It should have been someone who's like into more science-based books, like sci-fi, paranormal and stuff, who has more experience with that. And I really did not go into this book thinking I would hate it. You know, I wanted to read this book like I wanted to enjoy the series. Like I really like the series. Yeah, I wanted this book to be an expansion of it and to enjoy it. So I was so disappointed at how bad it was. So the show itself has a lot of flaws. Like, don't get me wrong. Like the sneaking into the corridors, it's the same level as the Scoops troops just going into the Russian base without being seen. This is bullshit. But you know, the whole Stranger Things series has good enough plots and good enough characters that you're just like, okay, I'm gonna forgive it. I know it's stupid and it wouldn't work, but let's just enjoy the thing. In this book, neither the plot nor the characters were good enough for that. Everything was boring and bland, so you just see the flaws. Yeah, because the book is so repetitive. Like, you could have felt that I was saying the same thing over and over again during this review. Well, that's how the book is. They go to the lab, they see stuff, they make plans. They go to the lab, they see stuff, they make plans, and it's just repeated over and over again. And every time, they just learn a tiny bit, and it's just not entertaining, it's boring. The point of having books, companion books, would be to expand, you know? But I feel like I learned nothing, and it actually brought down the characters. Brenner, it was just like this 2D villain, even though in the series like more nuanced, I guess. You know, he's still a jerk, but you can think more about his motives. Like, I know that he's an asshole, but he's probably thinking that he's doing the right thing, like he wants to save his country and protect it from the communists, so he's gonna go the extra mile to try and stop them to save his country, I guess. So he thinks he's right. He's evil for us because he's the protagonist, but maybe someone else would look at him and think, oh, he's such an admirable person. And that's how you make a good character, because no one is black or white. So I didn't learn anything or take anything from this book. And that's disappointing. Like, a better example is this book, which is the third one. I'm gonna talk about later in another video. But this book, it did build Max's character. And it did not go against what we had in the series. So I actually enjoyed this one. I actually went into this one thinking it would be childish and too simplistic, but it was actually good. I still have to read this one, and I hope it's the same quality done for Max. Let's go back to the interview with her for a second. The journalist asked her to tell more about her writing process, and she answers, I do the best I can to get to know my characters up front, so I can do a decently fleshed out outline on index cards on my office wall. I can imagine her index card. Alice Johnson. likes car, is a mechanic. On the wall. Gloria Flowers has a flower shop, likes comics, dresses nice, is black. On the wall. If you can fit your characters on an index card, they are not fleshed out, okay? Imagine, can you fit yourself on an index card? If you can, find some hobbies, okay? And then I try to progress through that plan as best as I can. I find drafting painful and love revision, so any hack I can use to make drafting feel less like walking a tightrope without a net is welcome. I don't understand what she means. Isn't drafting the time when you can write the big pile of shit that forces you to think about your story and to put the pieces together? You know, I'm starting to write myself, and I've just done not even a full draft so far, but I now write by hand because I would always keep editing if I was on the computer. I'd write a sentence, I knew it was shit, and I was trying to make it perfect. But then I would not write. So drafting, you can do whatever you want. That's the point of drafting. So I just don't understand that statement. And in the end, this book feels like a draft. So there are some places where there are typos, and some sentences, it's like either there's too many words that she forgot to erase because she changed the sentence, or there's lacking some. For example, this one. On this page, the idea of Brenner knowing what she saw and understanding, 3 dots, it had scared Alice to her core. Understanding, why is there understanding? Like, she's talking about her visions. The idea of Brenner knowing what she saw and understanding, it had scared her. I feel like this sentence is not right, or is it just me because I'm not a native speaker? I think I'm pretty fluent, but it's like she put the 3 dots thinking I'm gonna add something later, and then she didn't. Anyway, there was another typo, but I didn't put the right page number, and I'm not gonna search. There's a sentence in this interview. The great thing about being a writer with deadlines is that eventually you are forced to do the work. And this is just like reinforcing my idea of her writing this before the deadline. So, thank you. So I've talked about the characters feeling very flat and childish. And also, why are there only 4 people in this experiment? Because we just see these 4. It doesn't have any more of them? Because there were other women in the waiting room. Do they go on a different day? They're never mentioned. I hope he has more, because imagine like drawing conclusions on the 4 people who are just going around in your corridors. Genius IQ. I'm not gonna let that go. No way. I could believe that Brenner in the series has genius IQ. Brenner in the book? Fuck no. So he has 4 people and he uses 4 different methods on them. How can you make conclusions from that? You cannot. That's the thing. So there are these 4 people, and as I said, their relationship is so forced and unnatural. They have nothing in common apart from that experiment, and then they're super friends. There isn't one single conflict in the whole months that we're reading this book. And it spans almost a year. And Ken, he's really just there to be a psychic and tell some stuff. Because that's it. I don't know what else he is. He's gay and psychic. That's his index card. And it's not even explained how he's psychic. And Dr. Brenner is telling at some point that he is giving less than promising results, so he doesn't care if he doesn't show up like that last day. He's the psychic one. He has abilities, and you're just not seeing them? That's your whole experiment. Oh my god. It's just for convenience. So, you know, in high school related series and stuff, they cast 25-year-olds. In this instance, it felt like the opposite, that there were children in adults' bodies. Everyone in this story is stupid, including Brenner. And that's the only reason the plot can go forward, is because they're all dumb and they don't learn from their mistakes. In season 4, when Eleven tries to escape like the Nina project, he puts an electric collar on her. Because he learns from his mistakes. He's like, I don't want her to run off again, so I'm gonna make sure she doesn't. And here he cannot even lock the doors or tell Mr. Gorilla to stay with Terry so she doesn't go into the corridors. You cannot become a top scientist making government studies if you don't learn from your mistakes and make sure they don't get repeated. Because no matter how many times something would happen when the subjects were here, it would not take any measures. It would just repeat the same dumb mistakes again and again and again. Leave her alone, leaving Callie alone. Yeah, at some point it's just stupid. It's just unbelievable that over all these months he did not learn anything from it. He never changes the keypad code. You'd imagine that for classifying government stuff that they would not want the public to know, in the likes of the syphilis studies back then that were happening at the same time, you know, it's fucked up, you don't want the general public to know. And same with giving drugs and testing on kids. But no, he just keeps the same keypad code on every keypad in the building and never fucking changes it. Or just having guards. When Hopper sneaks into the lab, you know, he only manages to get this far before he gets stopped by men with guns like, what are you doing here? We saw you going around.
You forgot all the cameras, bud?
He's trying to play it off like, oh yeah, I was invited, and then he has to pretend and then to disarm them and knock a guy out and steal the key card. And yeah, they have key cards at this point. Actually, it's a good detail. I was respected that key cards were not invented yet. I think I read they were invented like 1975, so a bit afterwards, so that's okay. But come on, if Hopper was rightfully arrested like right away because it's a high security building, then Terry would have to be stopped as well. Also, they're called high security wings, but what's high security if there's no one guarding them? Like when Hopper goes to the morgue, there's someone guarding the fucking corpse of Will, and he has to knock him out to get inside. Because it's governmental, it's classified from the government. So to finish up, let's look at the cover of the book. So you can see this little sentence here. Before the Demogorgon, before the Mind Flayer, terror wore a human face. And there's a small review of SFX magazine at the bottom that says, a pacey, creepy book that does what any good prequel should. This is unmistakably Stranger Things. There is nothing scary or creepy about this story. Nothing at all. I don't understand where that comes from. Terror wore a human face? Yeah, he's a terror for 11. Because he's trapped her for so long, he's an abuser to her. But in this case, they just think he's suspicious and stuff. It does not terrorize them, it just wants them to stay for the experiment because that's what you'd want. You'd want your subjects to stay because you need like long-term results. But I was looking at reviews online and they were all positive. How can I see all this and not these people? Anyway, don't bother reading this book. It's really bad quality compared to the show, and it doesn't add anything. It destroys, actually. So just don't read it. Whoop. It's trying to commit suicide. I should too. So here you can see that I have the 3 next ones. I didn't read that one yet, like I said. But I've read these 2. This one is decent. I just didn't like where the story went, but it's more like a taste issue. And like I said, this one I liked. So it's not even like a general quality problem. It's just that this was not the right author for this book. Yeah, it's really just a problem with this book in particular. And I hope that the next 2 books are also as good as this one in terms of building the characters. I don't care if it's teenage-ish, childish, if it still builds the character and you take something from it. And also, if you want to know why it's called Suspicious Minds, I forgot to mention that, but basically at some point there's a song by Ives that plays and it's called Suspicious Minds. Thank you for watching this review if you're still there. My next video will be about this book, so subscribe if you want to see when I post it. And thank you again. And now it's time for me to shut the fuck up. Bye!